This past weekend I went to a UFC fight watch party with this girl I've been talking to for a couple of weeks. Let's call her P. We went to high school together 10 years ago, but didn't really talk that much during that time. But P and I had many mutual friends. We got reacquainted a couple of weeks ago and have hung out a few times since. Well, like I had stated before, back in high school, we had a lot of mutual friends. And a lot of those friends, P still is pretty close to till this day. And the vast majority of them, I haven't spoken to in about a decade. So pretty much since high school. After I graduated I left the state to play college football. And I didn't really come back home that often when I was in college. So I only kept in touch with my very close group of friends from back home. So there is a lot of people who I was pretty good friends with in high school, still have on social media, still wish the best for them, but have not seen and or spoken to in about a decade. I say that to say, P had asked me if I could come with her to the watch party the day before the party. I like to watch fights with my friends and her family, so I was going to say no. Especially since she said the host house belonged to one of her friends, who I didn't know. But then she told me that that friend was the wife of a guy I was friends with in high school and hadn't seen in a long time. She said she let them know that we had been seeing each other and they told her that she better bring me. Then she names other people who would be going. A lot of names of people I hadn't seen since high school and used to be pretty cool with. So that convinced me to go. I'm usually pretty introverted in houses I don't know, but when we showed up to the house, I saw a lot of people and knew. So since I was familiar with a lot of them, that introverted feeling immediately went away and I felt really comfortable and really enjoyed watching the fight with them, drinking, and catching up. The night was going really well. I was having fun. P is having fun. All vibes are good, until the incident. I was inside the house having a conversation. Then I noticed P was outside amongst a group of people out there sitting and talking. So I decided to go join. I walk out there and grab a chair. They are in the middle of a conversation, but I'm not even paying attention to what they are saying. I am just paying attention to grabbing the chair and placing it next to P so I can sit. There's about 15 people in this circle. I only knew about maybe half of the people in this group. As I'm about up sit down, the first words that I actually hear in this conversation was someone say something like "don't worry. Most male strippers are homosexual." I did not know any of the context of the conversation. But when I heard that I instantly responded with something like "no they are not. They be having sex with so many of the girls." After saying that I instantly went into why I know this. I have an older brother who is 5 years older. He had a best friend who was a really muscular dude who did male stripping for a little after they graduated high school. Let's call him M. M was a pretty popular male stripper from what I heard. I know he was once featured in a pretty popular magazine. He was well known in my city even before the stripping. M went to my high school too, but before I went there. And I didn't think anyone there would know who he is besides a guy that was there who I was close to in high school. Let's call him X. X came over to my house a lot back in high school and he met M a couple of times. Well, M did a lot of bachelorette parties. And he would always tell me about it. And sometimes X when he was there. M often said that if he ever got married, his girl would never be allowed to have male strippers at her bachelorette party. M said that at least 85% of the parties he does, the bride-to-be cheats. Often with multiple men. M said it was really rare that the bride-to-be didn't cheat to at least some degree. And he had proof of these claims with pictures/videos on his phone. And would not hesitate to show us. He said because of that, he would never allow it because he knows how it goes. I explained all of this to the group and even had X come outside to confirm that that's what M told us and showed us proof. After I finished talking, it was quiet for a moment and about 3 people walked off, none of which I knew personally. And it suddenly felt awkward. I didn't understand. Then P started telling me that prior to me sitting down, they were trying to make one of the guys in the circle feel better. Let's call the guy H. H was going to get married the next month. Him and his fiancée were going to do their bachelor/bachelorette parties a week apart. H's fiancée was currently on her bachelorette weekend in another city. And H was aware that they were going to have male strippers come to their Airbnb at some point. H had told them that initially he didn't care and wanted her to enjoy it, but had started becoming insecure about it. So the group was in the middle of trying to comfort him prior to me sitting down. I was not aware of any of this until after. I felt a little bad, but I also felt like I didn't tell a lie. Everything I said was from a direct source that lived it. But I do get I shouldn't have said it right there and I most likely wouldn't have if I knew the context of the conversation prior to sitting down. H was one of the 3 people who left the group after I spoke about what M and told me and X. The other 2 people that walked off, I didn't know them. It was a couple. And they are older than me. Well, turns out they also attended my high school and are about 6 years older. And have been together since high school and got married shortly after. Both of them knew who M was. Turns out the girl had a bachelorette party, with male strippers coming to a house for her, and M was one of them. And her man knew that he was one of the strippers and at the time found it funny because they didn't think one of the strippers would be someone they went to school with. Apparently at the time they both laughed about it, and the girl claimed she didn't get a dance from him because when he tried, she couldn't stop laughing. Well, after hearing what I said, apparently the dude got angry. Especially since I said M often provided proof to those claims, and had showed me an X. So the couple walked off and started arguing inside. I could see that were arguing through the glass door, but we didn't know it was because of what I said initially. But after I found out, I thought it would be better for me to leave. And it was already getting late, so me and P left. She was mad at me and told me I shouldn't have said all that. After that night I asked about 12 of the people that were there individually if they thought I was in this situation. I asked both men and women. It's literally split in half. Some say yes. Others say no. And some of the people who I didn't know there are pretty angry at me. Including all 3 that walked off. And to make matters worse, I spoke to M about what happened. I hadn't talked to him a long time. He lives outside of the state. But I have him on social media. I told him the story, knowing he would find it funny. After I told, M said he knew who the woman was. He said he only did one bachelorette party for someone he went to high school with. He proceeds to say her name correctly and describe her correctly. And then gives me details about that party. She clearly lied to her husband. And definitely contributed to that 85% stat. He even said he might still have video of that night on an old phone. But I'm not going to say anything about it anymore. I do not want to get involved. I don't know either of them and have no obligation to interfere in that relationship at all. Especially more than I already have. So am I the in this situation? How would y'all have handled this? Edit, the reason I said 2 relationships is because apparently H was really impacted with what I said. And also apparently seen/heard some suspicious things about the trip. What he saw or heard, I do not know. P was the one telling me and she didn't know either. And due to this, the wedding might be off. Some of them think I made him paranoid and to blame for this u/fabulous_anxiety_813 NTA. I thought that the male stripper stuff was pretty common knowledge tbh. I thought about telling him. But decided not to. I don't have physical proof. I might be able to get it but I wouldn't do all that. Especially for some people I don't know at all and will probably not see again. So I'm just staying out of it. If he finds out, he finds out. If not, let them go about their marriage. Yeah, I agree. M told us multiple times that it was rare that the bride-to-be didn't cheat to some degree. He said they didn't always have sex with one of the strippers. That they would have sex, but some would only do oral, some would only let oral be performed on them, some would only make out, and some would only jerk them. But any one of those things is cheating on my eyes. I don't care if you only did it for 2 seconds. All that is cheating. He said it was very rare that she didn't do something. He also said sometimes they would do everything. And after they finished they would snap back into reality and start crying and stuff because they realized now what they just did. All that was really eye-opening to me when he was telling me. Not only told me, but showed me multiple examples of everything he said. They were always recording. I would never let my fiancé get male strippers. Update 1. Was not really looking to tell a story. Just wanted other perspectives. But a lot of people asked for it. And yeah, it gets pretty dark. But I'll still tell it. Rigor warning. Well, I actually have an update on both of these couples. Both are bad. But I'll start with the lighter one first. H did end up calling off the wedding. So apparently the stuff I said about the male strippers did really mess with his head and made him start digging for stuff. I guess he went through his girl's phone without her knowing when she got back from her weekend, which apparently prior to this is something he has never done. His girl had a second Snapchat account that he didn't know about. Guess she didn't log out of it before H went through it. Apparently the only chat on it was a group chat with her friends. But on that snap she had a bunch of older sex tapes saved. And she had a bunch of videos saved in the group chat from their weekend. And the videos showed her not only hooking up with a male stripper, but also had her hooking up with at least 2 other men during bachelorette party weekend. Apparently he also was able to read chats where she said something along the lines of her feeling bad about how crazy she went that weekend, but she is glad she got to get her last urges out and is now ready to settle into her married life. He called off the wedding and all that. So in this case, I'm glad Duke heard what I said because I saved him. His girl went to another city and really got her shit off. So good thing he caught that before making it official. Now to the married couple. I didn't name them last time but I will here just to tell the story better. I know some of y'all didn't like the letters for names, so I'll name them John and Amy, not their real names. So the night from the original post where I told the story, I know some said that I should have read the room and all that. Not only was it hard because it was dark out and I had been drinking, but I also had people there asking questions and giving input in the middle of telling it. So I didn't get an indication about me doing too much at the time. John was one of the people who asked me a couple of questions. So John and Amy were lapped up when they were sitting out there. Amy sitting on John, of course. Apparently when I started going into describing M in the middle of my story and I said his real life name, John felt Amy start to tense up and feel uncomfortable. M's real name is pretty unique. In America at least. I've never seen anyone else with that name. So when I said it, it was very clear who I was talking about. And like I said, they went to high school with him and both knew who he was, which I knew nothing of at that point. And John knew Amy had M as a male stripper at her party. Well, I guess the more detailed and graphic I got about what M told me, in terms of the sexual acts, how rare it was that it didn't happen, and that he often recorded everything, the more uncomfortable John felt Amy getting. That had John get really suspicious and that's where he asked me a couple of questions in the middle of my story. I forgot what he asked. But it was nothing crazy. I think one of them was, did M send me the videos or just show me on his phone? Which he only showed me on his phone. I'm guessing Amy continued to get more uncomfortable and he felt it and got really suspicious, and that's where he walked off. Then the other two walked off also. So now fast forward to this past week. This is how I heard it played out. I don't know John or Amy. I know John's younger brother, but I haven't spoken to him since the day I asked him if I was off for telling that story to them, which he said I wasn't. P talks to John's brother but also is close with that group of friends. That is her close friends. I got this info from P, which is info that was regurgitated within the group. So I'm not sure on the accuracy of how it all played out, but I would guess it's pretty high. But the actual incident itself did happen 100%. I know because it's documented now. John and Amy argued inside the house and I'm guessing all the way home. Amy assured John that nothing happened with M or any of the other male strippers there. She also stayed with the story that she only got a partial lap dance from M, but had to stop because she couldn't stop laughing. Apparently John didn't fully buy it and came up with a plan to make her admit it. Earlier this week John confronted Amy about it again, but this time stated that he knew the facts already, so for her to come clean and be honest with him. John told Amy that he had been in contact with me and I also put him in contact with M, and from that he knew the entire story and that M still had the evidence. I can confirm that neither me or M have spoken to him. I haven't spoken to him since that night. M said he's never spoken to dude in his life. So I guess Amy felt like she was caught and admitted to everything. She told John that she fucked M that night. This made John snap. He beat her. Beat her bad. She ended up going to the hospital. I believe she's still in the hospital today. And apparently the only thing that made him stop was his kids running in the room and attempting to shield their mom. John of course was arrested. Charged him with attempted murder and a few other charges. So you can see it was a pretty severe incident of abuse. In his mugshot that they posted online, he has visible scratches, bumps, and bruises on his face, so I guess they were fighting hard before he overpowered her. I don't know why John said he had spoken to me. Maybe he knew that would work and get her to admit it. As far as I know, no one has seen this Reddit post from that night. He knows about it now, but I showed her after the fact when she was telling me about all this that I'm posting. She thinks that John might have seen the post and knew she did it, so came up with a way to make her admit it. But P says that she's never used Reddit, and has never heard any of the people in that friend group talk about using Reddit. But she also doesn't really know John and Amy. So I guess it is possible that John saw my original post. I'm not sure. But P said she's not going to tell anyone about the post. So yeah, that's the updates. I didn't feel like an before, but now I really do. I didn't want to lead to anyone getting beat, getting hospitalized, and getting arrested. I really do feel like shit about the whole situation now. Now on to second story. Defended my son against his mom's unfair discipline after he got detention for refusing to present with a random erection. I have 50-50 custody of my two boys with my ex-girlfriend. To make this easier, I'll give them names. My son George just turned 13 this month. He's a bit less physically developed than what's typical for his age, he hasn't hit a growth spurt yet and is one of the shortest boys in his class. If you saw him, you'd probably guess he's around 10 or 11 rather than 13. He didn't show any signs of puberty until August. This might not seem relevant, but it is. George is very bright, projected to get 8s or 9s in his GCSEs, and regularly achieves these grades in his mock exams and assessments. But he struggles with making friends and has dealt with bullying in the past. Things are better now, but he's still far from being a popular kid at school. As part of his product design class, he had to create a children's toy and give a sales pitch to the class. Last Friday was the presentation day, and George was really excited. He'd put a lot of effort into his toy and the presentation. That's why I was shocked when I got a notification from the school app saying George had been given a C3, after school detention, something he's never received before. The reason? He'd refused to participate in class and didn't do his presentation. Since they're not allowed phones during school hours, I couldn't message him to ask what had happened. When I picked him up, I could tell immediately that he was upset. I asked him what happened and why he didn't do the presentation. At first, he was hesitant to explain. He said he didn't refuse the presentation. When it was his turn, he asked to go later. His teacher said no, and that he had to do it then or get a C3. George said he couldn't do it now, but didn't explain further when asked, so he was given the C3. I was still confused as to why he didn't want to present when asked, so I kept pressing him, worried that maybe he was being bullied again. Eventually, he told me the real reason. He had a random erection just before his turn and, no matter what, it wouldn't go down. With that information, I think George's request was perfectly reasonable. He didn't refuse to do the presentation, he simply asked to do it a little later. Obviously, he didn't want to explain the reason in front of the whole class when the teacher asked him. His mom was really angry with him for getting the C3 and confiscated his Xbox. I tried explaining what happened and said I didn't think George was wrong. Since it was my week, I decided I wouldn't support the detention and would pick him up at the normal time. When I told his mom, she looked disgusted and said something like, "Why did he even have one in class to begin with?" I explained that random erections happen, especially in early puberty, and they don't always relate to sexual thoughts, which is what she was assuming. She replied, "Well, I'm not sure that's true," dismissing what I said. So I told her, "You might not be sure, but I am." She insisted we needed to present a united front, along with the school, and that by going against her, I was sending George the wrong message. I asked why her way of handling it was automatically right and why I should be the one to concede. It escalated into a big argument, which we haven't had in years. We aren't friends, but we usually get along fine and she's usually reasonable. She's saying she is going to punish him for refusing when it's her week with him next week and that I am being an off for going against her. Her mother texts me saying I was setting a bad example for George by letting him get away with being disrespectful to his teacher. Which he wasn't even, just asked to do his presentation later. I respectfully told her she should mind her own business, and that George was my son. Update 1. I'm writing this on Sunday the 27th, and it's currently half term for George, so he has a week off school. Firstly, George was never able to give his presentation, which he was really upset about because he had worked so hard on it. But the presentations aren't graded. I think this was a difference between the US and English education system. We don't generally have graded projects, at least I never did and neither does George. Also side note, but we can't repeat a year, or grade, here. At George's school he gets his effort grades at the end of each term, and he does a mock GCSE style exam at the end of each year which we get given the results, but these don't actually matter, they're just to give insight of how they're doing and to give practice for his real GCSEs when he's in year 11. On to another thing, many people commented that I should have shown him the old lift and tuck. I can tell you he already knows the trick. His school requires that he wears formal suit trousers, and if anyone has worn those type of trousers before, you know you can't do the lift and tuck effectively, and even if you could, a large bulge would still be easily noticeable. Okay, on to what happened with his school. So his head of year rang me after school on Tuesday and we arranged a meeting on Wednesday. I told George that he didn't have to share the details of exactly why he didn't want to do the presentation unless he felt comfortable sharing it. I wasn't going to force it out of him. The class teacher who gave him the after-school detention didn't come to the meeting. So it was just me, George and his hoy. His hoy is a really decent guy and he has a great relationship with George. His hoy started with saying he was so shocked when he learnt that George had been given a C3, since it was so unlike him, and asked what happened. Like I said, George has a great relationship with the hoy, so George started trying to explain. He didn't say I had an erection, he said something along the lines of something embarrassing was happening with my body and I just couldn't stand up when, teacher, called me. Hoy looked slightly puzzled for a brief moment, but then I think realized what George was trying to say and said something like, "Oh, no need to explain further. I was a teen once too, I understand." I went on to say about how they're aware he has a history of bullying, and he struggles with friends, and how I felt the teacher could have handled the situation differently. Hoy agreed, said he would discuss it with the teacher and he would cancel the C3 for George. I thanked him and he encouraged George to come to him with any problems in future instead of just getting upset and staying quiet. I thanked him. Now, on to George's mother. I wish I could say things went as well with her as they did with the school. I'm honestly not sure what's up with her, but she isn't usually like this. A lot of people were commenting that she sounds very unreasonable. In that moment I do agree with you, but normally she is not like that and we have a great friendship even though we are not in a romantic relationship anymore. She ended up ringing George to tell him that she wanted him to go to the C3 whether it had been cancelled or not. George rightfully said that was ridiculous and that he wasn't going to do that. They both ended up having a huge argument. She sent me a tirade of messages about how disrespectful I am. I'm not. How I was raising him to be entitled. Not true. How he'll end up in prison because he doesn't understand consequences. He won't and he does. I turned off the notifications for her messages and just left her to it. I am meant to drop the boys off at her house tomorrow for her week with them, but George has said he doesn't want to go. At this point I am of two minds on whether to support the decision or not. On one hand I wouldn't want her to ever encourage either of the boys to not spend their week with me, but on the other hand it should be his choice. I feel like I'm walking on thin ice here and I am honestly not sure how to navigate it. I could stay out of it completely and just let him make the choice, but maybe encourage him to spend his week with her. Because I think that's how I would like her to handle it. I do feel really conflicted.